After DNA test, Aretha Franklin's son finally confirms what fans suspected all along. What if I told you that the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, didn't just leave behind timeless music, but also secrets hidden in scribbled wills, courtroom battles, and a shocking DNA question that fans have whispered about for decades? From a spiral notebook tucked under a sofa to the haunting mystery surrounding her eldest son, the truth behind Aretha's family is more explosive than anyone imagined. This isn't just a story of music, it's a story of legacy, betrayal, and unanswered questions. Stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and join Legends of Black Excellence as we uncover it all. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin, born on March 25, 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, remains one of the most celebrated voices in music history. Known universally as the Queen of Soul, her influence went far beyond music. Her renditions of Respect Natural Woman and Chain of Fools weren't just songs, they were anthems for social change, especially during the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a personal friend, and Aretha even performed at his funeral in 1968, embodying the voice of a generation fighting for equality. Yet behind the spotlight and applause was a private life marked by heartbreak, resilience, and controversy. Aretha was the daughter of Reverend C.L. Franklin, a famous preacher in Detroit, and her childhood was shaped by both the church and the stage. By age 14, she had already recorded gospel music, and by 18, she was signed to Columbia Records. Fame came quickly, but so did personal struggles. She became a mother while still in her early teens, giving birth to her first son, Clarence, at just 12 years old, and her second son, Edward, 2 years later. This early start in motherhood shadowed her career, leaving lingering questions about her private choices and the difficulties she faced as a young black woman in the 1950s. Her career soared in the 1960s after signing with Atlantic Records. Hits like Think and I Say a Little Prayer solidified her as an icon. By the time she was in her 30s, Aretha had already won multiple Grammy Awards, eventually collecting 18 throughout her life, and selling over 75 million records worldwide. In 1987, she became the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a milestone that proved her unmatched status in the industry. But as her music career hit historic heights, her personal life remained turbulent. She endured a difficult first marriage with Ted White, marred by allegations of abuse and control, and later had 2 more sons, Teddy Richards and Aretha Franklin. Despite the fame, she was often described as deeply private, sometimes reclusive and fiercely protective of her family. When Aretha Franklin passed away on August 16, 2018 in Detroit, the world mourned a giant. Yet her death opened the door to even deeper mysteries. With an estate valued at nearly $80 million, fans expected a clear, legally prepared will. Instead, her family discovered several handwritten documents tucked away in unusual places, including one hidden in a spiral notebook beneath her sofa cushions. These wills contradicted each other, sparking a highly publicized courtroom battle between her sons. Do you think Aretha left multiple handwritten wills because she couldn't fully trust the legal system, or because she was testing her children's loyalty? The legal fight stretched for years, drawing global attention. In July 2023, a Michigan jury ruled that the 2014 handwritten will was valid. That document gave control of the estate to her youngest son, Kekalf, sidelining her older son, Ted White II, who had been favored in the 2010 version. What shocked many wasn't just the legal outcome, but a small smiley face Aretha had drawn inside the letter A of her name, a haunting final flourish that became a symbol of her complicated legacy. Even more controversial were the renewed questions about Clarence, her eldest son. Though Aretha clearly named Edward Jordan Sr. as his father in her wills, rumors persisted and no public DNA test ever confirmed it. Clarence, who has lived much of his life out of the public eye, became the silent heart of this story, his identity tied to the mysteries his mother left behind. Aretha Franklin's life is a paradox of glory and grief. She was a superstar who commanded the world's stages, yet she was also a woman burdened with secrets, family fractures and responsibilities far heavier than most could imagine. Her music will forever inspire, but her personal story reminds us that even legends carry wounds we may never fully understand. In the end, Aretha left behind more than songs. She left behind questions, the kind that echo as powerfully as her voice once did. And maybe that's why the Queen of Soul continues to resonate today, not just because of her brilliance, but because of her humanity, flaws, and unspoken truths. Clarence Franklin. Clarence Franklin, born in 1955, is the eldest son of Aretha Franklin, and from the beginning his life was surrounded by whispers, judgment, and unresolved questions. Named after his grandfather, the legendary preacher, Reverend C.L. Franklin, Clarence's very existence has long been at the center of one of the most enduring mysteries in the Franklin family, the identity of his biological father. Aretha, just 12 years old when she gave birth to him, carried the weight of that secret for decades. In multiple handwritten wills, one from 2010 and another from 2014, Aretha named Edward Jordan Sr. as Clarence's father. On the surface, this should have ended the speculation. Yet because no public DNA test has ever been confirmed, rumors lingered. Some insisted that the story was far more complicated than Aretha admitted, fueling a cloud of suspicion that followed Clarence his entire life. While his brothers Edward Ted White II and Keycalf were often in the public eye during the estate battle, Clarence's silence became its own powerful testimony. Growing up as the firstborn of a rising superstar came with challenges few could imagine. Aretha's career demanded constant travel, and Clarence often lived in the background, shielded from the spotlight but unable to escape the curiosity of others. His very name evoked questions: who was his father, and why did Aretha keep reiterating it in her personal notes? Over time, Clarence became a symbol of the untold chapters in the Queen of Soul's life. His story often discussed more in whispers than in facts. Despite this, Clarence remained loved within the family. Aretha provided for him and mentioned him in every version of her will, ensuring he would never be forgotten. Yet when the 2018 passing of Aretha Franklin thrust the family into a storm of courtroom disputes, Clarence once again found himself unwillingly pulled into public attention. The two competing wills, one discovered in a locked cabinet, the other hidden in a spiral notebook beneath a sofa cushion, became weapons in a legal war that lasted years. In July 2023, the Michigan jury ruled that the 2014 handwritten will was legally valid. This outcome gave control of the estate to Keycalf, the youngest brother, and shifted the inheritance structure Aretha had first outlined. Clarence was still recognized, but the verdict underscored how much of his life had been defined not by his own voice, but by the words and decisions of others. What makes Clarence's story especially tragic is how it reflects the clash between celebrity and privacy. He never sought the limelight, never released statements to defend himself, and never tried to profit from the speculation. Instead, he lived in the long shadow of his mother's genius, bound to an unanswered question that fascinated the public more than his own personal journey. For fans, he became the haunting reminder that even the most celebrated families carry wounds they cannot close. Clarence Franklin represents the human cost of living in the orbit of greatness. While Aretha gave the world songs of empowerment, her eldest son bore the weight of her most guarded secret. The lack of DNA confirmation keeps the speculation alive, and perhaps that's why Clarence's story resonates. It is not just about paternity, but about dignity, identity, and the pain of growing up with questions that may never have answers. In the end, Clarence Franklin's life is less about headlines and more about silence, an echo of the hidden truths his mother carried. His presence in Aretha's will proves her love never wavered, but the mystery of his origin remains one of the most powerful and painful elements of the Queen of Soul's legacy. Edward Franklin. Edward Franklin, born in 1957, was the second son of Aretha Franklin, and unlike many celebrity children, he rarely sought the public spotlight. While Clarence, his older brother, lived under constant whispers about paternity, Edward's life was defined by loyalty to his mother and a devotion to music that he inherited directly from her. Known within the family as gentle and unassuming, Edward carried an artistic gift that closely mirrored Aretha's, a voice that at times reminded listeners of the Queen of Soul herself. Aretha gave birth to Edward when she was just 14 at the dawn of her own rise to fame. His father, also named Edward Jordan Sr., became a controversial figure in the Franklin family's story, but Edward Jr. managed to carve out his own path despite the complications of his origins. He grew up in Detroit during a period when Aretha's career was exploding, and while his mother was conquering stages around the world, Edward's life often unfolded quietly in her shadow. Yet even in that quietness, he developed his own talent, performing occasionally with her on stage, and lending his voice to gospel and R&B performances that showcased the family's generational legacy. During Aretha's lifetime, Edward remained a constant presence by her side. He often accompanied her to public events and private church gatherings, reflecting the deep spiritual foundation of the Franklin family. Friends close to Aretha have noted that Edward was one of the children she leaned on most emotionally, especially during her later years when illness began to take its toll. When Aretha passed in 2018, Edward, along with his brothers, became entangled in the legal storm over her estate. The discovery of multiple handwritten wills, a 2010 version locked away in a cabinet, and a 2014 version hidden in a spiral notebook under a sofa cushion, threw the family into a painful courtroom battle. In the 2010, will Aretha set strict requirements for Edward and Kecaf to complete business courses or earn certificates before they could inherit. But the 2014 will erase those conditions entirely, signaling a mother's final trust in her sons, without restrictions. The legal fight reached its climax in July 2023 when a Michigan jury ruled the 2014 handwritten will valid under state law. This meant Edward was no longer bound by the conditions of the earlier will, and he, like Clarence, received his rightful portion of Aretha's estate. The decision also elevated his younger brother Kecaf to the role of executor, leaving Ted White II frustrated and sidelined. For Edward, the outcome was not just about money, it was about recognition. His inclusion in both wills underscored Aretha's love and commitment to him, a reflection of their close bond. Unlike Clarence, whose life was defined by unanswered questions, or Ted White II, whose disappointment was written on his face in court, Edward's position was steady. He neither gained extraordinary power nor lost everything. Instead, he stood as a balanced figure in the family, quietly carrying forward his mother's legacy. Edward Franklin's life story highlights the quieter side of fame. He is not a headline chaser, nor is he known for scandal. Instead, he represents the grounded, steady love of a son who stood by his mother through triumphs and tragedies alike. In the world's eyes, he may not have the same level of mystery as Clarence or the managerial role of Kecaf, but he remains essential to the narrative of Aretha Franklin's family. In the end, Edward's journey is one of quiet endurance. His voice, though less famous than his mother's, continues to echo within the Franklin legacy. His inheritance secured by the 2014 will was not just financial, it was the preservation of his place in history as the son of the Queen of Soul. And perhaps that more than any courtroom verdict is the true victory for Edward Franklin. Ted White II, born in 1964, was Aretha Franklin's third son, and the only child she shared with her first husband, Ted White Sr. His life has often been viewed through the complicated lens of his parents' troubled marriage. While his father was known as Aretha's former manager, a man whose relationship with her was clouded by allegations of control and abuse, Ted White II grew up determined to carve out his own identity. Unlike his older brothers, Clarence and Edward, Ted White II inherited not only his mother's love for music, but also a sharp sense of business. He became a professional musician, playing guitar, writing songs, and working closely with Aretha on several projects. His presence on stage and in the studio reflected both the weight of his lineage and his determination to prove himself on his own terms. Over the years, he developed a reputation as talented yet private, someone who wanted to live under the shadow of music rather than tabloid headlines. But the story of Ted White II took a dramatic turn after Aretha's passing in 2018. When her handwritten wills were discovered, one from 2010 and another from 2014, They revealed vastly different visions of the family's future. In the 2010 will, Ted White II was named as co-executor of the estate alongside one of Aretha's nieces. This role would have given him significant authority over the Queen of Soul's legacy, from royalties to property management. To many, it seemed clear that Aretha trusted him to be the guardian of her empire. That confidence, however, disappeared in the 2014 will found hidden under a sofa cushion. In this later document, Aretha crossed out Ted White II's name and appointed her youngest son, Kekaf, as executor instead. The removal left Ted stunned and sparked one of the most heated disputes in the Franklin family saga. For Ted White II, the change felt like a personal rejection. He fought in court to have the 2010 will recognized, arguing that its structured approach with requirements for his brothers to complete business or educational courses was a responsible way to handle a multi-million-dollar estate. He believed that Aretha's legacy deserved order, not emotional gestures. His stance highlighted the tension between two competing visions, one of discipline and control, and another of maternal trust and simplicity. In July 2023, a Michigan jury delivered its verdict. The 2014 handwritten will was valid. With that decision, Ted White II lost not only his role as executor, but also the symbolic confirmation that he was his mother's chosen manager of her legacy. Reports from the courtroom describe him sitting with a steely expression as the decision was read, his disappointment visible. While his brothers Kekaf and Edward breathed sighs of relief, Ted had to accept a more marginalized role in the family inheritance. Despite this outcome, Ted White II remains a significant figure in the Franklin story. He is not just the son who was crossed out of a will. He is also the musician who carried Aretha's sound into live performances, the son who once seemed destined to guard her empire, and the man who stood firm in believing structure was the best way to honor her. His fight in court, though unsuccessful, revealed his deep commitment to preserving his mother's legacy with stability and discipline. Ted White II's journey is bittersweet. He will always be remembered as the son who came closest to being Aretha's professional heir, only to see that role slip away in her final handwritten words. Yet in many ways, his struggle embodies the complexity of Aretha's legacy itself. Brilliance wrapped in contradictions, trust intertwined with doubt and love complicated by silence. Kekaf Cunningham. Franklin, born in 1970, is the youngest son of Aretha Franklin, and the man who ultimately inherited the most responsibility after her passing. Known throughout Detroit and beyond as a rapper and gospel artist, he earned the nickname Kekaf the Rapper while pursuing his own music career. His style blended hip-hop rhythms with the church-rooted soul of his mother's legacy, creating a unique sound that kept the Franklin bloodline alive in modern music. Yet despite his talent, Kekaf often lived away from the spotlight, overshadowed by his mother's enormous fame and the family's complicated dynamics. During Aretha's lifetime, Kekaf was described as the most private of her sons, rarely stepping forward in the press. But in her final years, Aretha seemed to lean toward him in an unexpected way. This became shockingly clear after her death in 2018, when multiple handwritten wills were found hidden in her Detroit home. Among them, the 2014 spiral notebook, tucked beneath a sofa cushion, carried a revelation that stunned the family. Aretha had crossed out her son Ted White II's name and appointed Kekaf as the sole executor of her estate. The change was more than symbolic. It meant that Kekaf, once the least visible Franklin child, would suddenly control the Queen of Soul's empire, her property's royalties, and priceless intellectual property. This included a Bloomfield Hills mansion valued at more than $1.1 million at the time of her death, which was specifically left to him. The ruling positioned Kekaf not only as the guardian of Aretha's estate, but also as the emotional heir to her trust. When the case reached court in July 2023, it became the climax of the Franklin family's long legal battle. Lawyers debated whether the 2010 will with its strict conditions or the 2014 will with its simplicity reflected Aretha's true final wishes. In the end, the Michigan jury sided with Kekaf. The 2014 handwritten will was declared valid, confirming him as executor and placing him in charge of an estate estimated at tens of millions of dollars in royalties, properties, and memorabilia. For Kecaf, the victory was bittersweet. His new role came at the cost of family unity, with his brother Ted White II left sidelined and tensions within the Franklin family exposed to the world. But beyond the courtroom drama, the verdict also highlighted something deeply personal. Aretha trusted Kecaf, perhaps above all her children, to safeguard the legacy she worked her entire life to build. Outside the legal battles, Kecaf's life has had its own struggles. In 2018, shortly after his mother's passing, he was arrested for driving under the influence, a setback that briefly darkened his image. Yet, supporters argue that this moment showed his humanity, a reminder that the children of legends face challenges of their own. Despite personal flaws, Kecaf has pressed forward, balancing his own music with the weighty responsibility of managing a cultural icon's estate. Kecaf Franklin's story is one of transformation from the least-known Franklin son to the central figure in one of the most watched celebrity estate battles in history. His inheritance was not just financial but symbolic, a sign that the Queen of Soul believed her youngest son could carry the family torch forward. Whether he will rise fully to that challenge remains to be seen, but one thing is clear. Kecaf is now forever bound to the destiny his mother wrote for him in her own hand. Edward Jordan Sr. When the handwritten wills of Aretha Franklin were discovered after her passing in 2018, one name appeared again and again: Edward Jordan Sr. For decades, his name had been whispered in connection to Clarence Franklin, Aretha's eldest son, but never before had it been written with such finality by the Queen of Soul herself. In both the 2010 and 2014 wills, Aretha stated clearly that Clarence's father was Edward Jordan Sr., a declaration that seemed to settle years of rumors, but in truth only deepened the mystery. Little is publicly documented about Jordan's life, and much of what is known comes from fragments tied to Aretha's early years. At the time she gave birth to Clarence in 1955, Aretha was only 12 years old, and Edward Jordan was identified as a young man who had been in her circle. This fact alone has haunted the Franklin family's story for generations, sparking debates about consent power and silence. Though Aretha never publicly spoke in detail about that period, the presence of Jordan's name in her private notes revealed how significant he remained in her memory. Over the years, speculation about Clarence's paternity often overshadowed Jordan himself. Some fans doubted whether he was truly the father, citing alternative rumors that circulated within Detroit's tight-knit music and church community. Yet, without a DNA test or a public statement, the truth never reached the light. Jordan's life outside this controversy remains largely absent from the historical record, adding to the aura of uncertainty that surrounds him. The inclusion of Edward Jordan Sr. in Aretha's wills carried heavy weight during the 2019 to 2023 estate battle. While the courtroom centered on which will, 2010 or 2014, was valid, the question of Clarence's father lingered in the background, feeding the public's fascination with the family drama. In the 2014 will, found in a spiral notebook beneath a sofa cushion, Aretha once again wrote Jordan's name. By repeating it across multiple documents, she seemed determined to secure her son's legitimacy and shield him from doubt. Yet, ironically, this repetition had the opposite effect on fans and media. If the matter was so clear, they asked, why did Aretha feel the need to restate it more than once? Why wasn't there a single definitive statement made during her lifetime, or a legal document confirming it beyond her own handwriting? This paradox ensured that Edward Jordan Sr.'s name remained tied not only to Clarence but also to a cloud of speculation that refuses to lift. What makes Jordan's role in the Franklin story so haunting is his absence. Unlike Aretha, whose life was lived in the blinding glare of fame, or her sons who were drawn into the estate dispute, Jordan remains a ghostly figure present only in scribbled notes, courtroom whispers, and the memories of a family that never fully addressed his place in their history. His shadow looms large over Clarence's life, defining the eldest son's identity more by questions than by answers. Edward Jordan Sr. may never have sought the spotlight, but history has placed him at the center of one of the most delicate chapters in Aretha Franklin's legacy. His name, written by her own hand, became both an answer and a riddle, a key to Clarence's identity that also unlocked decades of speculation. Whether he truly was Clarence's father may never be confirmed, but his presence in Aretha's private words ensured he will forever remain part of the Queen of Soul's story. Aretha Franklin's legacy is one of unmatched brilliance, but also of unanswered questions that refuse to fade. From Clarence's mysterious paternity to the shocking power shift in her handwritten wills, the Queen of Soul left behind more than music. She left behind a family saga that still divides opinion. Was her final will an act of love or a spark that deepened old wounds? Did naming Edward Jordan Sr. truly end the rumors or create more doubt than ever before? Tell us what you believe in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence.